already know our last presenter. His name is Michele Mennielle, and he is sorry, I don't have my notes. A strategic. He does the international strategic activities at DSpace, and we're very pleased to have him today. As our final speaker, and we probably will have a few moments for questions at the end if people have questions. The floor is yours.
Hi all. First of all, I'd like to thank the 4 courageous people who spoke before me, because they're sharing the responsibilities of keeping you away from the dinner. So thank you for this. You're fearless. So where I come from, the thing that actually people do before dinner is not, it sounds crazy, but it's not listening to someone speaking about institutional repositories or open source software, crazy Italians. But they actually have aperitivo, which is a nice word to say they drink a lot before dinner, where they're going to drink even more. I know you're not Italian, so you're not thinking about drinking, but in case you are, I can promise you this. If you listen carefully to my presentation, when I'm going to get to that drink, you're going to enjoy it, as is the best thing that ever happened to you today. So anyway, besides the jokes. Thank you, Kathleen, for inviting me here. So I'm here, as Kathleen said, I work at Lyrasis, where I'm a senior global strategist. And Lyrasis is a few things, but the reason I'm here is because Lyrasis has been around for almost 100 years. And is the organizational home of several open source projects. And he works as a consortium licensing organizations for the US. And it represents a lot of communities and members. But I'm going to get to it a little bit later. So as Heather also mentioned, Catherine asked us 3 questions for this panel. The first one is why we think open source repositories are important. And I try to look at this from kind of a higher perspective, not just repositories, but in general, open source systems and platforms. And I try to mix proprietary versus open source projects. And when I think about proprietary systems, I think about money and being able to invest money and being timely in the releases, so responding to needs. I think about tons of investments in marketing and communication. They need to sell, so they really think that it's important to talk about what they do. They use the data they have to create interesting and structured analysis and share their data among the systems. And they're pretty expensive, so they cost money because they deliver. And most importantly, they're closed system, which is not exactly the value that we shared here, isn't it? They can do many things because they are closed. On the other hand, we don't have tons of money to invest, and we're not very good, as Heather also said, in delivering solutions to our users. But we have a network of people, which is much more important than the resource of having money and being timely. Because if well structured, we have tremendous opportunities to actually talk about what we do. And we can do it because the communities are global. They speak all the languages in the world. So we don't actually have to spend and invest money in many things that the proprietary software company have to do, because we have the community that could do it for us. We don't operate in a closed environment. We are a network. And Kathleen talked about it yesterday and today, about how important it is a distributed network of repositories that they communicate with each other and actually share the data and information that they have in each of them. And if we gather all of those data information is much more than a closed environment can ever even think of having. And they're cost effective. I mean, they cost a fraction of what a proprietary software could cost you, a fraction. And most importantly, they're open. And open is not just the value, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of developing things, it's the way of sharing things, it's a way of considering the importance of data. But it's not easy at all, as we heard before. So as I said, I mean, I work for an organization that hosts several different open source projects. So when Kathleen asked me that question, I actually shared that question to my colleagues. And I ask all the different programs to give me an idea of what are the major challenges they're facing. Because again, it's not just repositories, it's a way of developing things. So ArchiveSpace, for example, which is an archiving software, they said that, I mean, it's good. I mean, it's going well. The usage is growing, but there's a major component of challenges, which is about awareness. So users do not actually know that behind that piece of technology, there's a community. There's an organization that's trying to keep that thing alive. They don't know it because they just download it and use it. Then I asked DSpace, and so I also asked myself a little bit. And one is obviously kind of connected to awareness. It's like usage versus membership. I'm going to get a little bit more later on this, but usage of this space is enormous. As you know, we're talking about thousands and thousands of repositories running this space around the world. Membership is nothing. It's like not even 3% of that. And so there's an issue there, obviously. And the other one is meeting expectations. There's a misleading concept here that the organizational home or the program itself is responsible for delivering things. It's not. We are not. We don't develop this space. We don't develop those software. You are. So actually, when you ask us when a new feature will be out there, you should ask yourself when we're going to be able to do that and contribute it back to the community. I know it's crazy as a concept, but it's actually how it works. And that's why we might need to revisit that. Fedora mentioned that the problem was to actually get in touch with the community because the governance and the community were on different world, on parallel world, and they were trying to do completely different things. And now they're getting back together again. And for Vivo, it's a matter of communicating complexity in a simple way. So it's a matter of adoption and engagement because people see this as a barrier. So keywords that I also heard a lot today. I mean, one, it's silos. All the open source projects and programs I know, they just look at the programs they're working on and nothing about what's happening around. So we are reinventing wheels over and over again continuously. Resources is probably the main problem. We don't have not economical resources, financial, and nor technological resources, because as also Heather said, developers are now much more busy in doing other things, and the skill set that we now have for technologies are not easy to find. But that's related to development, and open source programs were much more in fashion a few years ago, where people had time and could actually they were proud of contributing something to the open source world. Now it doesn't work like this anymore. I mean, we saw hundreds of developers just stepping back because they're doing something different. Marketing is an issue because we just don't invest in marketing because we don't think it's useful because the software should speak by itself. Accountability, as I mentioned before, no one knows who's accountable for those projects. We can say it's the community, we can say it's the organizational home, we can say it's the program itself. And so when you don't have accountability, it's very hard to move ahead. There's a lack of coordination, as I mentioned. At Lyrasis, we're trying to fix this, try to get different programs together. But it's not easy because, I mean, the governance is based on voluntary contribution and people have other things to do. And there's a problem of engagement at all different levels. Now, how we're trying to address those issues from a DSpace perspective, because Kathleen asked me to focus a little bit more on DSpace for this presentation. we've been trying to do a few things in the past couple of years. Some of them worked, some others a little bit less. So on the resources side, we, thanks to the collaboration with SCOS, we were able to hire a program coordinator, a part-time program coordinator, which was a new thing for this space, even if this space has been around for 20 years. That program, which is the most widely adopted repository around the world, didn't have a program coordinator up until a few months ago. And so that explains a lot about this space, I guess. Next step might be to get a junior developer in order to support the technical lead in what it does. Sustainability. We launched a new idea, which is the development fund. So it's not about contributing through membership to the program, but actually to try to support the development, which is a big part of this space, obviously. It worked well, and it's based on development priorities, which were shared with the communities and approved by the governance. Because again, we're talking about community-led programs. So committers, developers, governance, each of them could have different ideas. So we listed all the priorities. We asked the community to prioritize each single feature, and then they became, basically those features became the roadmap. And so we went back to the universities and institutions saying, this is what we need to do. This is what the community wants us to do. We need money because we need development, and we don't have that. So can you please contribute at least to the development part? And that worked very well. So SCOS, as I mentioned, and then we try to create a different kind of membership structure based on consortia, meaning that institutions within the same country can get together, pay a lower fee, but start contributing a little bit more. And for engagement, we invested a lot in building up national user groups. We created a completely new service provider program. Evan mentioned the importance of service providers, trying to fill the gaps of development and relationship with the community. The new program is based on in-kind technical contribution, which is, again, one of the biggest issue for this space. So the idea is that the providers can even get their fee to zero if they contribute technical development to this space. And that helped a lot in having new developers contributing to this space 7. And we want to organize more and more events. And the idea of the events is not just to share the classic best practices. Honestly, I don't think that works much anymore. What we need to do is organizing an event like the one of Friday, kind of workshop to train people in using those technologies, because that was one of the main issues for this space. It took us 7 years to release this space 7 instead of 2. Which is obviously an issue working with open source technology. And throughout those years, we didn't train anyone. And now that this space 7 is out, there are not enough know-how and technology skills around to actually support the institutions and universities in upgrading to this space 7. Now, the pursuit of happiness, which is sustainability for us. So as I mentioned before, more or less, this space has 100 members, and 100 members do not represent 5,000 users around the world. They just don't. It's impossible. They don't represent them, and they don't provide enough resources to represent them. The volunteer development that we have is based on a couple of service providers, and literally not even 10 people. Those 10 people who have different priorities cannot support thousands of users around the world. They can't. It's not their job. It's not our job. It doesn't work. So we need to completely change our mindset and structure of how we actually deal with open source technologies. Because open source is not free. I know it looks like it, because you can download it and use it, but it's not free. I assure you, there's someone behind the scene who make that possible for you to download it. It's a responsibility. It's a collective responsibility of each one of us who are actually using it. Otherwise, it will disappear. It will disappear because there's not going to be resource. It's like, I mean, free, it's a beer that the aperitivo was talking about, but open source technologies are free like a puppet. You need to nurture it. You need to take care of it. So we have to think about those technologies as a component of a much larger ecosystem that we've been talking about today, and that Core very well represents in all the efforts they're doing. We need to rethink the engagement and participation in open source projects, which means business model. We can't base the development of technologies as contributing, volunteering. It doesn't work. We are competing with companies who has billions of profit, who can invest in everything they want to. If we want to compete and keep this space or any other open source programs at that level, we need to provide support. We need to provide support in different languages. We need to provide trainings. And in order to do so, we need resources. I think we should completely, shift the way we look at those things. And the last thing is obviously what I was mentioning before. We can't think that someone else would pay for it, someone else would become a member, someone else would contribute, and then I just download it and use it as I please, and sometimes I even complain because there are not enough features. We can't. So if you want to keep using it, just get involved, be part of this, and really change the thing you want to change. Thank you for listening.